Prince William has just pulled off what might be the most ruthless power move the British monarchy has seen in modern history. The part that has everyone talking behind the palace walls is not just that he blocked Queen Camilla's family from a major royal ceremony, but the precise, cold manner in which he executed the entire operation. He dug deep into the palace archives and weaponized a dusty, practically forgotten legislation from the year 1772 to strip away everything Camilla had secretly planned. The entire situation played out like a high-stakes political thriller, except it unfolded in real life within the stone walls of Windsor Castle, witnessed by senior courtiers. The deeper you analyze what actually occurred, the more you realize this was never a simple family disagreement over a guest list. This was a full-blown palace counter-coup executed with a calculated precision that would make the late Queen Elizabeth II proud. Through this single action, William has completely redrawn the balance of power within the House of Windsor, establishing an iron authority that leaves no room for outsiders. To fully comprehend why the Prince of Wales resorted to such extreme measures, one must examine the disturbing events that transpired during King Charles's recent medical isolation. The king has been fighting severe health battles, leaving him heavily medicated, physically fatigued, and highly vulnerable in his private quarters at Clarence House. During one of these specific periods, when the sovereign was not in full control of his faculties, Queen Camilla allegedly seized the opportunity to alter the future of the monarchy. She did not approach him with a casual request or an open spousal conversation, but instead brought a formal, legally worded dossier bound in red leather straight to his bedside. This document laid out a highly ambitious plan to officially elevate her children from her first marriage, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopez, along with her grandchildren, into the ranks of the British nobility. Camilla sought guaranteed titles, permanent spots at major state events, and the right to be addressed with high honors that are traditionally reserved exclusively for those born of royal blood. It was a direct attempt to graft her own bloodline onto the ancient institution, ensuring the Parker Bowles name would become a permanent fixture in the future of the monarchy. The fundamental problem with this move was a complete lack of constitutional process. Had this been a legitimate royal request, it would have undergone rigorous scrutiny by constitutional lawyers, privy councilors, and the direct heir to the throne. Instead, Camilla bypassed every single established protocol to exploit a sick, isolated man on painkillers. The most alarming detail from inside the palace claims that when the king was unable to hold the pen properly, Camilla physically guided his hand across the page to secure a jagged, barely legible signature. This crossed a line from typical palace intrigue into a serious ethical boundary, transforming a marriage into what looked like a political takeover during a time of extreme vulnerability. Immediately after securing this paper, Camilla began operating as if her grand plan was already law. Within 48 hours, she took her children and grandchildren on what palace staff described as a victory tour through the restricted, hallowed sections of Windsor Castle. They walked through locked staterooms past priceless royal art, and even entered the historic robing room where coronation garments are preserved. Tom Parker Bowles was seen sitting in ceremonial chairs, reserved strictly for princes of the blood, while the grandchildren handled antique marble busts and pulled at ancient velvet curtains. Camilla watched the entire display with deep satisfaction, attempting to normalize their presence and make their future inclusion feel completely inevitable before anyone could challenge the legitimacy of the signed paper. However, she made a fatal mistake by assuming she was unobserved. Prince William saw the entire tour from the shadows of a second-floor corridor. Rather than storming down to cause a public scene, which would allow Camilla to play the victim and hide behind the king's affection, William remained perfectly calm. He understood that an emotional confrontation would be a gift to her, so he stepped back into the dark to construct a flawless counter-strategy. He had witnessed the enemy's opening move, and now he was going to destroy it completely. His first step was finding a strong, uncompromising ally within the family, someone who valued the sanctity of the crown above all personal drama. He approached his aunt, Princess N, the late Queen's famously stoic daughter, who has long served as the institutional conscience of the family. Their meeting took place during a secret midnight conference in the deep archives beneath Windsor Castle. Together, they searched for a definitive legal weapon to invalidate Camilla's maneuver, and they found it within the parliamentary history of the Royal Marriages Act of 1772. This ancient law was originally enacted by King George III, who was furious when his brothers married commoners without royal consent, establishing that the purity of the bloodline required strict oversight. Although the literal law was modernized in 2013, William and focused heavily on its core constitutional spirit. That major structural changes to the royal family cannot be decided by a sovereign's isolated signature alone without the formal consent of the immediate heir. They argued that a signature obtained from an incapacitated king, without witnesses or the approval of the Prince of Wales, was legally worthless. They had no intention of arguing this in a public court, choosing instead to enforce it within the internal world of the royal household, where precedent and the sheer will of the heir carry absolute authority. With their legal foundation secure, William and launched a comprehensive palace-wide enforcement campaign executed with military precision. They established a loyal network of guards from the Welsh regiment, placing Queen Camilla under quiet but absolute surveillance. Every single movement she made was logged, every visitor to her chambers was recorded, and every key borrowed from the palace master was tracked. The primary goal was to anticipate and physically block any attempt she might make to utilize that red dossier. The ultimate flashpoint for the silent war centered around the gold-plated metal gala passes for an upcoming international royal ceremony, credentials that represent the ultimate symbol of inner circle status. Camilla had already submitted her family's names to the palace management office, confident that her signed paper guaranteed their entry. She was already discussing wardrobe and jewelry with her daughter, completely unaware of that princess, and was waiting for the request to arrive, when the document reached the desk, and personally intercepted it with the 1772 law book placed firmly beside her. Without hesitating, she ripped up every single pass bearing the names Parker Bowles or Lopez, her expression described by witnesses as icy and unyielding. She locked the destroyed credentials in a large iron box and issued a strict order that the guest list be immediately narrowed to exclude anyone outside the direct royal bloodline. Meanwhile, Prince William was out on the ceremonial platform itself, personally overseeing the complete erasure of Camilla's ambitions by altering security codes on the electronic scanning gates and removing the allocated seats for her family, replacing it with elaborate floral arrangements. William issued a final, absolute command to every guard patrolling the private walkways, accept orders from no one except the Prince of Wales. The trap was perfectly set, and the stage was now secure for a public reality check that Camilla would never forget. The atmospheric tension inside the Grand Palace reached a boiling point on the morning of the international ceremony. Queen Camilla was entirely oblivious to the silent trap that Prince William and Princess and had meticulously engineered behind the scenes. She moved through the private apartments of Clarence House with absolute regal poise, her deep blue ceremonial gown trailing elegantly behind her. As she adjusted her jewelry, she gave sharp, confident instructions to her children, Tom and Laura, telling them to stand straight and prepare themselves for a historic transition that would permanently elevate their social standing. She genuinely believed that the red leather dossier resting inside her administrative bag was an unchallengeable, absolute mandate signed by the sovereign himself. Her strategic calculation was simple. If she could physically place her family inside the exclusive VIP enclosure and introduce them to the international dignitaries under the glare of global media cameras, the public reality would become irreversible. By the time anyone questioned the internal legalities of the arrangement, the Parker Bowles presence would already be an established fact within the active monarchy. She had fatally miscalculated the psychological stamina and tactical intelligence of her stepson, who converted the entire ceremonial checkpoint into a secure wall of institutional defense. Every single security guard stationed at the outer perimeters and the private walkways had been replaced by elite personnel from the Welsh regiment, a unit bound by fierce personal loyalty to the Prince of Wales. These men had received direct, uncompromising orders that overrode any standard palace protocol. The scanning codes on the electronic entry gates had been systematically rewritten, wiping out the digital footprints of the passes Camilla had confidently ordered earlier that week. The magnificent golden archway, which served as the final security gate before entering the grand ceremonial platform, was now a geopolitical barrier designed to expose her overreach in the most definitive way possible. As the afternoon arrived, the historic courtyard filled with the soft murmur of European nobility, foreign diplomats, and elite journalists from every major international news outlet. The atmosphere was thick with expectation, though none of the gathered guests understood the internal war that was about to collapse right in front of them. Camilla led her family procession toward the grand golden archway with complete confidence, flanked by her sharply dressed son and daughter, with her grandchildren following closely behind. She could already see the rows of velvet-lined seats on the platform, assuming her family would occupy the front rows as promised by her secret document. However, as they stepped within 5 feet of the entrance, the atmosphere shifted instantly into absolute, chilling silence. 4 heavily armed guards from the Welsh regiment stepped forward in perfect, synchronized military precision. With a sharp, metallic crash that echoed off the stone walls, they crossed their ceremonial steel swords directly in front of the archway, creating an immediate, impassable barrier. The sudden movement caused the surrounding crowd to stop talking completely, all eyes locking onto the unexpected confrontation. The captain of the guard stood perfectly rigid, his face completely expressionless as he looked directly at the queen consort. His voice was loud, clear, and formal, echoing across the courtyard as he delivered the devastating message that Her Majesty could pass through the gate immediately, but her companions were not listed on the authorized master guest list and were strictly denied entry. The public humiliation was instantaneous and total, sending a visible shockwave through Camilla's family. Witnesses observed her facial expression turn from a triumphant flush to a deathly pale white as the reality of the barrier registered in her mind. Her voice shook with a mixture of immense rage and mounting panic as she reached into her bag and pulled out the red leather dossier, waving the document aggressively in the clear afternoon air for everyone to see. She screamed at the guards, declaring that she held an absolute executive order signed directly by the king, demanding that they stand down immediately and respect the sovereign's signature. It was at that exact microsecond of maximum public tension that Prince William and Princess emerged from the deep shadows of the stone archway into bright sunlight. William stood in his full, immaculate ceremonial military uniform, radiating an impenetrable, chilling authority that filled the space. Beside him, Princess stood like an unyielding statue, holding the heavy, leather-bound 1772 law volume tightly against her chest like a protective shield. William did not raise his voice. Instead, he spoke to his stepmother in a flat, icy tone that cut through the silence of courtyard. He informed her, within earshot of the entire diplomatic gathering, that the signature she held was completely useless under the core constitutional principles of the monarchy. He explicitly invoked the historic precedent of the Royal Marriages Act, stating clearly that the structural integrity of the royal bloodline could not be altered or diluted by a document obtained while the sovereign was physically incapacitated and without the binding, formal consent of the direct heir to the throne. He told her calmly that her family's unauthorized credentials had been permanently revoked and their names completely erased from the active database. The checkmate was structurally flawless, leaving Camilla with absolutely no bureaucratic recourse. Yet, in a desperate final bid to salvage her grand ambition, she turned away from William and rushed toward the far side of the platform where King Charles had just been positioned. The king looked deeply fatigued, disoriented, and incredibly fragile, seated in a high-backed wheelchair surrounded by his personal medical team. Camilla grabbed his hand tightly, her voice cracking as she begged him to intervene publicly, demanding that he tell William to back down and confirm to the entire court that he had willingly signed the red dossier. The entire gathering of global nobility held its breath as the ultimate test of sovereign authority unfolded. Even in his weakened state, the king's final word was supposed to be absolute. For a long, agonizing moment, King Charles looked from his desperate wife to his fiercely determined son. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement that carried more destructive weight than any verbal condemnation, he slowly withdrew his hand from Camilla's grip, closed his eyes to shut her out completely, and gave a subtle signal to his personal driver to move his wheelchair away from the confrontation. The king had turned his back on his wife, choosing the survival of the institution over her personal ambition. The silent rejection from King Charles left Queen Camilla standing entirely frozen in the middle of the ceremonial platform, exposed to the stunned whispers of the global elite. Her absolute shock quickly transformed into a cold reality as the heavy machinery of the palace enforcement structure immediately moved into operation around her family. There was no chaotic screaming match, nor any dramatic physical struggle. Instead, the removal of the Parker Bowles contingent was executed with a quiet, devastating administrative efficiency. Her son Tom and daughter Laura were firmly but politely surrounded by senior royal security officers and systematically guided back down the main ceremonial corridor, away from the international cameras and the diplomatic seating zones. Their faces were shielded from the aggressive long-range lenses of the media as they were escorted out of the secure perimeter of Windsor Castle. In a final, highly calculated institutional insult designed by Prince William to underscore their absolute return to civilian life, the family was not loaded into the standard black royal limousines. Instead, they were directed toward a row of ordinary London black taxicabs that William had specifically arranged to wait outside the secondary gates. This sharp contrast served as a permanent visual reminder that their brief illusion of nobility had been completely shattered, restoring them instantly to the rank of ordinary commoners. While the family was being driven away from the palace grounds, Princess and walked deliberately across the stone floor toward the spot where the red leather dossier had fallen during the confrontation. She picked up the unauthorized document, carried it across the grand chamber toward a large ceremonial fireplace, and without uttering a single word, tossed the entire bound text into the roaring flames. The assembled courtiers watched in complete silence as the pages containing the ambitious dynastic plans, along with the jagged, invalid signature of the king, turned into black ash and disappeared forever. The institutional purges that followed this public incident were immediate, comprehensive, and permanently binding. Under the direct supervision of Princess and Tom Parker Bowles, Laura Lopez, and their children were placed under a lifetime ban, preventing them from entering any official royal residence across the United Kingdom. Their high-level security clearances were permanently revoked, their names were completely deleted from all future state guest lists, and the subtle privileges they had quietly enjoyed over the past decade were systematically stripped away. They were denied access to royal transport vehicles, barred from utilizing private crown holiday estates, and completely isolated from the aristocratic social circles that had previously courted them. Prince William's objective was not merely to exclude them from a single afternoon ceremony, but to completely erase their administrative footprint from the future of the House of Windsor. For Camilla herself, the consequences of her failed bedside maneuver were even more severe. She was effectively placed under a strict form of internal isolation within a secluded wing of Clarence House, completely cut off from the levers of palace influence. The personal staff members who had previously served her were immediately replaced by the same disciplined Welsh guards who had crossed their swords at the Golden Archway. These guards now monitor her perimeter with mechanical precision, logging her daily routines, and ensuring she can no longer communicate directly or privately with her husband. If she wishes to see the king, she is only permitted to view him through the thick, reinforced glass panels of his medical suite, unable to enter his room, speak to him, or attempt to justify the actions that led to her downfall. King Charles has retreated even further into quiet isolation, completely accepting the new operational reality established by his heir. Palace sources indicate that the king never mentions Camilla's name, never inquires about her family, and has fully surrendered the active management of the royal household to the Prince of Wales. The historic 1772 law volume has been returned to its secure shelf within the deep palace archives, but its most ruthless constitutional principles have now been thoroughly integrated into William's standard operating procedure. The Prince of Wales has demonstrated to the entire world that he possesses the tactical ruthlessness, the legal intelligence, and the absolute will require to protect the long-term legitimacy of the crown from any internal or external threat. The public may continue to see a facade of unbroken royal tradition, but the internal reality has shifted permanently toward an era of absolute control, where the iron gates of the palace are closed tightly, never to open again for anyone outside the direct royal bloodline.